They say betrayal is like a slow-burning fire, consuming everything in its path. It doesn't happen all at once, no. It starts small, a spark so faint you almost miss it. A glance, a word, a moment you convince yourself doesn't mean anything. But before you know it, the fire is raging, swallowing up everything you thought you could control. And the worst part? You don't even realize you've struck the match until it's too late. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I thought I was just living my life, surviving one day at a time. Just like everyone else, right? You wake up, you get through the day, you go to bed. Repeat. You're grateful for what you have, or at least you try to be. But somewhere along the line, the cracks start to show. And then someone comes along, and they see the cracks. They don't judge them. They don't try to fill them. They just notice you in a way you haven't been noticed in years. And that feeling is dangerous. It's intoxicating. It's like drowning your sorrows in the sweetest wine, knowing full well it's poisoned but drinking anyway because it's the only thing that makes you feel alive. You tell yourself it's harmless. A little attention, a little flirtation. What's the harm? You're not crossing any lines. You're just being seen. But then it happens. The moment you never thought would come. The moment where the little harmless thing turns into something big. Something real. Something you can't take back. You look at yourself in the mirror, and you don't recognize the person staring back at you. And that's when it hits you. When the guilt starts eating away at you, bit by bit. You want to stop. You beg yourself to stop. But there's another part of you, a part of you didn't even know existed. And it's begging you to keep going. It's telling you, this is the only thing that's made you feel alive in years. How can you walk away from it now? I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would do something like this. I mean, who does, right? You hear about these stories, people who risk everything, throw away their families, their lives, for what? For a moment? For a feeling? And you think to yourself, that would never be me. I'm stronger than that. But let me tell you something. Loneliness is a tricky thing. It sneaks up on you. It wraps around you like a fog, so thick you don't even see the road ahead anymore. And when someone comes along with a light, even the dimmest one, you'll follow it without thinking. You'll follow it anywhere. I didn't realize what I'd done. Not at first. I thought I could keep it small, keep it hidden. I thought I could control it. But you can't control fire. Once it starts, it takes on a life of its own. And before you know it, it's not just burning you. It's burning everything and everyone you love. And by the time you try to stop it, there's nothing left to save. I'm not proud of what I did. I don't expect you to understand. Hell, I barely understand it myself. But if you're still here, listening, maybe some part of you does. Maybe some part of you knows what it's like to feel invisible. To feel forgotten. Maybe some part of you knows what it's like to make a mistake you can't take back. If you do, then maybe you'll understand the rest of my story. Or maybe you'll judge me. Either way, I need to tell it. Let me start by telling you about us, about me, about him, about everything that led to this moment. Because if you're going to understand, really understand, you need to know where it all began. I'm 37. That's not old, right? But some days I feel ancient, like life has passed me by without so much as a wave goodbye. I used to have dreams, big, bold dreams. Travel the world, write a novel, live a life so full of color it would leave people breathless. But somewhere along the line, those dreams got smaller. Or maybe I just got smaller. I became a wife, then a mother, and then nothing. Just a shadow of all the things I used to want. My husband, Mark, is a good man. Hardworking, reliable. The kind of man you marry because you know he'll never leave you, never let you down. But somewhere along the line, we stopped being us. We became roommates, co-parents, strangers who shared a bed, but nothing else. He's always busy, work, emails, phone calls. Always something more important than me. And I get it. I really do. He's providing for us, for our kids. I should be grateful. But how do you stay grateful when you feel like you're disappearing? There was a time when he'd look at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, his eyes full of love and something else, something I can't even name. But that look is gone now. I don't know when it disappeared, but I do know I miss it. I miss being seen. And then there's him. Ryan. He's younger, not by much, but enough to make me notice. He's Mark's coworker, a rising star in the company, the kind of guy everyone gravitates toward. Charismatic. Confident. Funny. When he's in the room, it's like the air shifts, like everything and everyone leans toward him without even realizing it. Including me. The first time I noticed him was at one of our family barbecues. He was charming everyone, my kids, my friends, even my mother. But it wasn't until he turned that charm on me that I felt it, that spark. He asked me a question, something simple, something silly. But he asked it like he actually cared about the answer. And I don't even remember what I said, but I remember how I felt. Like I was interesting. Like I was alive. I told myself it was nothing. Just a little harmless attention, a moment of feeling noticed. But it wasn't just that. Not really. Because after that day, I started noticing him too. The way he'd smile at me, the way his laugh filled the room, the way he seemed to really see me when no one else did. And I started looking forward to the times he'd come over, even though I knew I shouldn't. I know what you're thinking. That's the moment, right? That's when it started. But it wasn't. Not yet. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, my heart racing, my mind screaming at me to delete it. But I didn't. I let it sit there, like a secret waiting to be discovered. That was the night I started questioning everything. My marriage. My life. Myself. Was I a bad person for wanting more? For wanting to feel something, anything? Or was I just human? I didn't know the answer then. And honestly, I'm not sure I know it now. And that's where it began. With a text I didn't respond to, a feeling I couldn't shake, and a fire I didn't even know I'd lit. If you think you know where this story is going, let me tell you, you don't. Because neither did I. It was supposed to be just another dinner party. Just friends, some good food, a little wine. Nothing out of the ordinary. Mark had invited a few coworkers over, and of course, Ryan was one of them. I remember standing in the kitchen, arranging appetizers on a platter, feeling that strange mix of excitement and guilt twisting in my stomach. I told myself it was ridiculous. He wasn't coming for me. He was Mark's friend, his coworker. I was just the hostess. And then he walked in. I swear, the whole room seemed to shift, like someone had turned the volume down on everything else. He smiled at me, the kind of smile that feels like a secret, and I felt it again, that spark, that fire I kept pretending wasn't there. He hugged me hello. Nothing unusual, right? Except it felt different. I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his hand on my back. It was so brief, so innocent, but my heart was racing like I'd just run a marathon. As the night went on, I couldn't stop stealing glances at him. And the thing is, he was looking too. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into things. But then there was this moment our hands touched. Just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to send a jolt of electricity through me, enough to make me pull my hand back like I'd been burned. He didn't say anything, didn't even flinch, but the look in his eyes, it was like he knew exactly what I was feeling. And the worst part? He didn't look away. I told myself to get a grip. It was nothing, just a stupid moment. I had a husband, a family, a life. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. Something I couldn't name, something I couldn't ignore. He leaned in, his voice low, and said, "You're amazing, you know that? The way you keep everything together, make it all look so effortless." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like he wasn't just complimenting me, he was seeing me. And in that moment, I felt it again, that dangerous, intoxicating feeling I'd been trying so hard to push away. I should have laughed it off, said something polite, and changed the subject. But instead, I just sat there, staring at him, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. And then, just for a second, our eyes lingered. Too long. Long enough that it felt like a promise. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. It was a simple message, harmless on the surface. But the way it made me feel, it wasn't harmless. It was everything I'd been craving, everything I'd been missing. And for the first time, I didn't delete it. I didn't ignore it. I just stood there, holding my phone, wondering what the hell I was doing. I didn't reply that night. But I didn't delete it either. And in my heart, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Looking back, I realized that was the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped pretending I could control the fire. The moment I stopped pretending I didn't want it to burn. I've always kept a journal. Not consistently, but enough to feel like I had a place to put the thoughts I couldn't say out loud. Lately, though, the pages have been hauntingly blank. Maybe it's because I didn't want to admit, even to myself, what was going on. But that night, after everyone had left, after Mark had gone to bed, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. I love Mark, don't I? I've always loved him. But why does it feel like I'm suffocating? Why does it feel like I've been invisible for so long I'm starting to disappear completely? And then there's him. Ryan. He makes me feel like I exist again. Like I matter. But it's wrong, isn't it? It has to be. So why can't I stop thinking about him? I felt like I was trapped between two worlds. One where I was a good wife, a good mother, someone who did what she was supposed to do. And another where I was alive. Where I felt something I hadn't felt in years. But the guilt? God, the guilt was unbearable. Every time I thought about him, I felt like I was betraying everything I'd built with Mark. And yet, I couldn't stop. There were so many moments like that. Times when I'd try to connect, try to spark something between us, but it was like talking to a wall. I'd ask him how his day was, and he'd give me one-word answers. Or worse, he'd nod, not even hearing me. And when I'd ask if he was okay, he'd just say he was tired. Always tired. I told myself it was normal. Marriage isn't always exciting. People get comfortable, life gets busy, and the spark fades. That's just how it is, right? But deep down, I wondered, is this all there is? Is this what I'm supposed to settle for? Every night, it was the same battle. Do I text him? Just something simple, something harmless. How was your day? Or, thanks again for coming over. But every time, I stopped myself. Because I knew it wouldn't end there. Once I opened that door, I wasn't sure I'd be able to close it again. I hated myself for even considering it. But I couldn't ignore how he made me feel. How he looked at me, how he listened to me, how he noticed me. I kept replaying those moments in my head, the way his hand brushed mine, the way he told me I was amazing. And every time I thought about it, I felt alive. Like the version of me I'd lost somewhere along the way was finally waking up. But it wasn't just about Ryan. It was about everything I wasn't getting from Mark. The conversations we weren't having. The moments we weren't sharing. The love I wasn't feeling. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. At him. At myself. At the life we'd built that felt so empty now. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I wasn't the person I used to be, the vibrant, ambitious, passionate woman who believed in love and happiness and all those things that felt so far away now. And I couldn't help but wonder, if Ryan saw that version of me, could he bring her back? And that's the thing about guilt. It doesn't just eat away at you. It hides in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to remind you of everything you're afraid to admit. I was falling into something I knew I shouldn't want. But I couldn't help it, because for the first time in years, I felt something. And I wasn't sure I could let it go. It started so innocently. Just a coffee. That's what I told myself. What harm could there be in grabbing a coffee with a friend? That's all it was. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. He looked so casual, so at ease, like this was the most normal thing in the world. But for me, it felt like a storm was raging inside. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and I couldn't figure out if it was from excitement or guilt. Probably both. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, family, stupid little stories from our pasts. But underneath it all, there was this tension. This unspoken thing hanging between us. Every time his hand brushed against mine, Every time he leaned in just a little too close, it was like a spark igniting. And I knew I should have pulled away, but I didn't. I started paying more attention to how I looked. Picking out clothes I knew would catch his eye, putting on a little more makeup than usual. I told myself it was for me, that it made me feel good. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just for me. It was for him. One coffee turned into two, then three. Then it wasn't just coffee anymore. We'd go for walks, sit on a bench, and talk for hours. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other forever. And yet, every time we parted ways, I felt this ache. This pull to see him again. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You deserve to be happy, you know that?" And in that moment, I felt like he could see right through me. All the cracks, all the emptiness, all the things I'd been trying so hard to hide. And instead of turning away, he stayed. He saw me, and he stayed. He leaned in, just a little, and I didn't move. I should have, but I didn't. I could feel his breath on my skin, the warmth of his presence pulling me in. And just as our lips were about to meet, my phone started ringing. It was Mark. Of course, it was Mark. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, and all I could think was, what am I doing? I answered the call, trying to sound normal, trying to pretend I wasn't sitting in a park with another man, moments away from crossing a line I couldn't uncross. After that, I told myself it had to stop. That I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep risking everything. But even as I thought it, even as I promised myself I'd end it, I knew I wouldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want it to stop. It was like I was living two lives. In one, I was the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman everyone expected me to be. And in the other, I was someone else entirely. Someone who laughed and felt and wanted. And the line between those two lives was getting blurrier by the day. I kept telling myself it wasn't too late. That I could still walk away, still fix everything. But the truth was, I didn't want to. Because for the first time in years, I felt alive. And I wasn't ready to let that go. That night started like so many others. Mark and I barely spoke over dinner. The kids were loud, the TV was louder, and the tension between us was deafening. I don't even remember what started the argument. Probably something small, something stupid. But by the time the kids were in bed, we weren't even looking at each other anymore. I tried to talk to him. I really did. I asked him what was wrong, why we couldn't seem to connect anymore. And he just shrugged. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. I snapped. Said things I didn't mean. He didn't even fight back. He just walked away, up the stairs, and shut the bedroom door. And that was it. That was the moment I realized how alone I really was. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It was such a simple question, but it felt like everything I needed in that moment. Someone who cared. Someone who saw me. Without thinking, I typed back, "No, I don't even know why I texted him." Or maybe I do. Maybe I just needed someone to listen, someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. And he was there. He was always there. When I saw him standing there, I almost turned around. Almost. But something in his eyes stopped me. He looked worried. Like he knew exactly how I was feeling, even before I said a word. I told him everything. About the fight with Mark. About how lonely I felt. About how I didn't even recognize my own life anymore. And he just listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. He just let me be. When he touched my hand, it was like a dam broke inside me. All the feelings I'd been holding back, all the guilt, the longing, the anger, it all came rushing out. And before I knew it, I was crying. Sobbing, actually. Right there, in front of him. He said, "You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not." And in that moment, I believed him. I believed every word. He leaned in, and I didn't stop him. I couldn't. Our lips met, and it was like everything else disappeared. The guilt, the fear, the doubts, they were all gone. All I could feel was him. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel invisible. I felt wanted. I told him we couldn't. That it was wrong. But even as I said it, I didn't move. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to stop. And when I finally whispered those words, "Don't stop," it felt like I was giving in to everything I'd been fighting for so long. I don't even know how long we stayed there, holding each other, caught in this whirlwind of emotions we couldn't control. But when it was over, when we finally pulled apart, the weight of what we'd done came crashing down. And all I could think was, there's no going back now. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. And no matter how much I wanted to, I knew I couldn't undo it. I couldn't take it back. And the worst part? A part of me didn't want to. The morning after was unbearable. Mark sat across from me at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone like nothing had changed. And why would he think anything had? He didn't know what I'd done. He didn't know who I'd become. But I did. And I couldn't unsee it. I avoided Ryan after that night. Deleted his texts, ignored his calls. I told myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my family, my marriage. But everywhere I went, I felt his presence. At work, at the grocery store, even at home. He was in my head, in my thoughts, in the guilt that weighed on me like a stone. And then there were the moments I couldn't avoid him. The family barbecues, the birthday parties, the random visits when Mark would invite him over without warning. Every time I saw him, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't look at him without remembering, without feeling that pull, that ache. But I couldn't look away either. Mark started noticing something was off. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way he'd pause before asking if I was okay. I tried to act normal, to laugh at his jokes and smile at the right moments, but it all felt hollow. Forced. And he could tell. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. My first instinct was to delete it, to erase it before Mark could see. And I did. But even after it was gone, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. Those 4 words haunted me. What did he want to say? Was he feeling the same guilt I was? Or was it something else? Something worse. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The woman staring back at me wasn't the person I used to be. She was a stranger. Someone who'd made choices she couldn't take back. Someone who was breaking apart everything she'd worked so hard to build. And the worst part? I didn't know how to stop her. He finally asked me what was wrong. "You've been so quiet lately," he said. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him the truth. God, I wanted to tell him everything. But the words wouldn't come. So I just nodded, forced a smile, and said, "I'm fine. Just tired." I could feel him pulling away, retreating into his own silence. And I hated myself for it. I hated that I was the one creating this distance, the one who was tearing us apart. But I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I even could. I thought about texting him back. Just one message. Just to explain, to apologize, to, what? What could I possibly say that would make this right? In the end, I didn't send anything. But I didn't delete it again either. It just sat there, a reminder of everything I couldn't escape. I was caught in this web I'd spun myself, tangled in feelings I didn't know how to untangle. Every step I took seemed to pull me deeper, further away from the life I thought I wanted. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to find my way back. How did I become this person? How did I go from being the girl who believed in love, in loyalty, in forever, to this? To someone who could look the man she vowed to honor in the eye and carry this secret in her heart. I should have been grateful for him. Mark wasn't perfect, but who is? He worked hard. He cared for our family. He gave me everything I thought I wanted. So why wasn't it enough? Why wasn't I enough? There were so many little moments. So many times I tried to reach out, to spark something between us. And every time, it felt like I was talking to a ghost. Like he was there, but not really there. I told myself it wasn't his fault. He was tired, stressed, doing his best to provide for us. But the more I tried to justify it, the lonelier I felt. He found out. In the dream, he always finds out. I try to explain, try to tell him it wasn't what it looked like, but the words won't come. He looks at me, his eyes filled with so much pain, and says, "Why? Why would you do this to us?" And then, just before I wake up, I hear him say it. The thing I'm most afraid of. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I can't let this destroy us. I can't. But how do I fix it? How do I fix something when I'm the one who broke it? There were so many good moments. So much love. How did we lose it? How did I let it slip away? Was it him? Was it me? Or was it both of us, too caught up in the chaos of life to remember what really mattered? I thought about telling Ryan I couldn't do this anymore, that it was over. But every time I tried, I felt this ache. This pull I couldn't explain. It wasn't just about him. It was about how he made me feel. Seen. Wanted. Alive. And I wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. But then I thought about Mark. About our kids. About the life we'd built, the life I was risking for something I couldn't even define. And I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep living like this, caught between two worlds, torn between what I wanted and what I knew was right. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I can find my way back to the woman I used to be. But I have to try. For them. For him. For me. Have you ever felt so alone that you'd do anything just to feel seen again? I know I'm not the only one. I can't be. Because loneliness, it's like this quiet storm. It starts small, just a whisper of doubt, a shadow of emptiness. But it grows. It gets louder and darker until it's all you can hear, all you can feel. And then one day, someone sees you. They offer you something you've been craving for so long that it feels like oxygen, and you take it. Even if you know you shouldn't, you take it. I don't know how to move forward. I don't even know if I can. But I know this. I'm not the only one who's felt this way. I'm not the only one who's been torn between their heart and their morals, between what they want and what they know is right. So, tell me, have you ever been there? Have you ever stood at that crossroads, unsure of which path to take? Have you ever made a choice that you knew would change everything? If you have, I need to hear from you. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you did, how you found your way through it, or if you're still trying to. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen even in the smallest way, please like this video. Subscribe if you want to hear more. Because maybe, just maybe, we can figure this out together. Loneliness is a dangerous thing. It doesn't just creep into your life, it takes root. It grows, wrapping itself around your heart until you start believing its lies. It tells you you're not enough. That you'll never be enough. That no one sees you, no one cares. And in that darkness, you reach for anything that feels like light. I thought I was finding love. I thought I was finding myself. But I wasn't. I was only losing more of who I was, losing the people who truly mattered. And for what? For a fleeting moment of escape? For a lie I wanted so desperately to believe. So here's what I've learned. Cherish the people who truly care for you. Don't let the noise of loneliness drown out their love. And if you're struggling, don't wait until it's too late to ask for help. Don't let yourself get so lost that you can't find your way back. Because in the end, the choices we make define us. And sometimes, the hardest choice is the one that leads us back to ourselves.